Enterprises. Harry, joining me here on this Thursday morning. Harry, how are you doing, man? How's it going? Been since last week since we've talked, last Friday. Just under a week since then. How have things been with you?
Well, let me just share a little personal commentary. I tested positive for COVID-19 last week, Sunday. And I knew I had something before that. And I looked after myself. I'd self isolated and said, yep, COVID is real. I had it. I jumped on it right from the beginning. I didn't have a fever. I didn't have a breathing problem. And for a broadcaster, that's a big thing. And but I had a tremendous cold, and I lost my taste and smell for 7 days completely. And but I'm good to go. I was done isolation on Monday, and but I took an extra week to stay at home just to rebuild the immune system because it really takes a hold of your body. And you know what? I'm not 25 anymore, and so therefore you watch even a little more. So that's where I'm at. I'm actually feeling pretty good this morning, but I need to be careful. So at the end, I'm going to have a tip about exactly this to not only farmers but everybody.
Sounds good, and it's great to hear that you're doing better than you were. COVID-19, of course, a scary, scary disease, and it's real, like you said. People who don't believe that, I can't believe it if you don't believe that COVID-19 is real at this point. But we'll move away from that. We'll talk about some agriculture. Talking about, the weekly crop report. What's come out in the crop report this week?
Well, the crop report stopped last week. They officially, but at the same time, we had that rain, and then farmers started to get back out in the field. But there's corn and sunflowers left to harvest, and I'm sure with the sunshine we've seen the last few days, some of the combines are going again, and then of course the field work. And the other thing that we need to be aware of, November. Normally it would be November 10th, but because of the kind of year we've had, the provincial government has extended the period when farmers, especially livestock farmers, can apply the manure to the fields. And that's been extended to November the 22nd. So that's a good thing, and what the weather will be like, we don't know. So that extension depends on whether we have snow or rain or those kinds of things. So people, they used to spread manure out on the snow. I remember on my farm, my dad's farm, we had a stone boat, and we would take the manure from the barn and we would just go out on the field and fork it off, put it on the snow, because that was the best thing to do. Well, they found out very quickly that any of that manure lying on top of the snow, number one, doesn't do a lot of good for the fields, for the simple reason spring comes on, runoff happens, and then that manure runs into the streams. So then they put a stop to that. But we have so much of the manure application which is done by cultivation. It's inserted directly into the soil at probably 6-inch depth levels, and so that as well has been extended to November 22nd, as well as applying nutrients to the fields, meaning the fertilizers that farmers apply in the fall and get their fields ready for the next spring. So that too has been extended to November the 22nd. So those are some of the things that are happening right now. Every farmer is out there preparing the soil as they see fit for next spring. So we're in next year's country, and especially some of the farmers that didn't have a very good crop this year, they in fact are looking really forward to next year because we do have some moisture, but we still need a good snow cover in order for some runoff to happen next spring. But of course, we're not in control of that.
Yeah, for sure. Only can control the things that we can, right? And as long as we do that, that's all you can do. Talking about finishing the harvest. How the harvest is going at this point.
Well, it's as I said, I have a contact with the Hutterite colony just west of Winkler by 4 or 5 miles. It's called the Blumengart colony, and Daniel texted on Twitter. I guess it was maybe on another WhatsApp group, and he was just showing their setup for drying grain corn. So they were just starting to harvest corn, and the yields have been pretty good. But again, we don't have a lot of corn acres. We maybe have, I don't know, 350,000 acres. That compares to 1.3 million acres of soybeans, and then in the other crops we have. I think in Manitoba we have about 14 million acres of cropland that farmers can actually plant and seed and harvest, and then of course some of that may be pasture, some may not be. But I think the other thing is continuing to listen to livestock producers on Twitter across Western Canada. I saw several comments this morning. Whether it's Alberta, whether it's Saskatchewan, whether it's Manitoba, we're seeing some of those real difficulties playing out right now. There's still not the amount of feed at the cost that livestock producers can afford. There's still not that feed available. So farmers, livestock producers are actually selling off parts of their herd. I saw one sale up at Ashern Auction Mart just this week where the farmer sold off pretty well everything because he just didn't see what kind of feed would be available for his herd. So that's in a nutshell. The field work is happening. The harvest is all but done, and the livestock producers continue to scramble a little bit, either selling off parts of their herds or looking for extra feed under government programs, which they can bring in from Eastern Canada, where they had a decent hay crop. But you know what? It's all relative. It's all relative. It's all relevant or relative. Yes, for the simple reason the costs of hauling feed from Eastern Canada at the price of fuel today becomes prohibitive. And so if the government doesn't step in and develop and give some subsidy of transportation and so forth, the livestock producer simply says, forget it. I'm not going to haul in feed and pay an arm and a leg and then have to sell my cattle at a smaller margin because the feed costs are so much more.
Talking more about the federal government, I spoke to you on the phone yesterday. You
Yep.
told me about the federal government pulling out on fertilizer use. Speak about that story. It really interested me when we first spoke about it, but just let our viewers
I
know.
finished the article last night, and it's called "Cutting Fertilizer Emissions by 30% is Devastating for Farmers and the Food Chain." And so far, we haven't seen the actual part of it, but from what we gather, that's the target, and that's what the government wants to implement. Shock is how the Western Canadian wheat growers responded by the depth of the impact of the federal government's proposed 30% reduction in fertilizer emissions. That's the Western Canadian wheat growers that started out years ago. When I first started out as a farm broadcaster back in 1971, my father-in-law, then Mr. J.M. Fraze from Winkler area, was the local member of the legislature. But he became involved at the ground level of the Palliser Wheat Growers Association. The Palliser Triangle is the southeastern part of Saskatchewan, southwest part of Manitoba, and then western and eastern. And so these were the wheat farmers from that area, Palliser wheat growers. They became the Western Canadian wheat growers, representing wheat growers across Western Canada and so forth. And I've worked with them closely, and that was their response. Ryan Dick is a territory manager with Manitoba with the ADM Agra Industries located in Loselle, Manitoba. He weighed in on the challenges farmers will face if the feds actually implement the policy. And I met him on a WhatsApp group called Canadian Agriculture, and I've known him from before. In fact, when we started to compare notes, we actually were relatives, as so often happens in the Mennonite name game, right? But Ryan is grew up in the low farm of Manitoba area, farms there, but he together with his company representatives responded to about 5 questions that I asked him to respond to. And so this stuff is, and he says many companies are working on biologicals for years now that they feel they are getting close to consistent results. It would allow farmers to use a specific biological that will help fixate 20+% of the nitrogen needs for cereal crops from the soil and atmosphere. We need to see consistent results, says Ryan, for this to become an accepted practice to trust and use. If it comes to reality, it would work, but at the same time, it would reduce the ability. But the whole aspect of the lack of fertilizer use, it just absolutely devastates the potential for farmers to actually make a living farming. And that's the real story. And if farmers cannot make money at growing food, that means that it will also affect our food chain. And that's the one that we need to be concerned about. Farmers, yes, 2.5 or 1.5 to 2% of the population, but the other 98, and of course the farmers eat as well, 100% need the food. So if the federal government thinks that they're going to solve the so-called climate change problem on the backs of farmers and reduce their fertilizer use emissions, then we have a real problem. The numbers that Myers Norris Penny, a national accounting firm, they did the analysis, and they said that the losses for farmers in Western Canada each and every year, if they have to pull back fertilizer use 30%, would amount to $8.5 billion in Western Canada that farmers would not get out of their crops.
Wow, that's crazy. And yeah, it would, like you said, create, well, not like you said, but in my opinion, create a trickle down effect where, one thing happens, you take away the, pulling out on fertilizer use, and then there's a chain of other stuff that happens, and it affects a lot of people, which
Yep.
is insane that this could be going down. We're going to get some updates on the story as the weeks go along here.
Yep.
But a lot more we could talk about today, but we're gonna end it off here because we are running short on time, Harry. We'll go with Harry Siemens, farming tip of the week for farmers on Siemens Says.
Well, the key thing that I wouldn't share today, because I shared it right off the top, is that COVID is real. Be careful. I got my vaccinations back in July 29. Was the last one. And I still caught COVID. I have no idea where I got it. I was with some people, but nobody else had it. And so my tip to everyone, yep, it's real, but the thing we have to be careful of is that we don't live in fear, because so many people are living in fear because of this. Take the precautions if that's what you need to do, and then move forward from there. In agriculture, on the farms, of course, right off the hop, back 2 years ago when COVID became a real, they were social distancing because you only need one person in a tractor cab. You only need one person in a truck. You only need one person in a combine. And so that's that part of it saved us as far as the agricultural industry is concerned, helping us to move forward so it didn't really affect the ag industry other than all the other fallouts from COVID and people getting off work.
Well, there it is. Harry Siemens, farming tip of the week on Siemens Says, and I'll add this point just for people out there. Like Harry said, he's got his shots, both his vaccinations. Guys, this is a vaccination, not an immunization. You're still prone to getting COVID-19. Just the chances are a lot less high of you getting it. That's
Perfect.
just what I want to add on to
Hey,
clear
great
that up
show,
for everyone.
great show, Graeme.
Oh, I appreciate that, Harry. We'll see you next week, eh?
You
With
bet.
another edition of the Farm Report. See you then,
Take
Harry. You
care.
take care.
God bless.
And Harry Siemens.